Yeah, Timen, thank you so much for coming on today. Really appreciate your time first thing in the morning, early on. But yeah, maybe just give me a bit of background because I came across you on LinkedIn and it's like you've done a little bit of everything. I love it. It's just really for me like curiosity sort of yeah, it got me curious about your story. So yeah, maybe just a bit of explanation to how you ended up to where you are now.
Yeah, thanks, Kalani. When we reached out when we were discussing this, it immediately sparked my curiosity too, because our slogan at Lacàph is "Coffee's for the curious," so it kind of matches really well. I've been in Vietnam since I was about 21, and so quite a while. And now I'm 37, and I came really because I had an internship, and I had traveled to Vietnam. I really enjoyed the country. It feels like a country that's like really ready to develop fast, and there's a lot to do and a lot of things that you can invest yourself in. And uh and I came here for an internship initially. I wasn't really planning on staying this long, and it's probably a story that you hear more often. And I got a job offer after the internship was over, and I kept on going from there. And my last sort of, what I say, like real corporate job was head of marketing at Remy Cointreau, which is a French wine and spirits company. So I was taking care of the product portfolio for Vietnam and some other markets in the region. And uh, and then it became easier for foreigners to actually invest in the country, because initially it was very difficult. It was only really possible to own up to 49%, and also in a relatively limited category range. So as part of the WTO ascension, Vietnam sort of promises to open up new areas for investment every year. And I started basically the only category that was more or less available, which was IT and consulting back then. And so I think I was probably one of the first 100 or so people that had a 100% foreign direct invested company in the country. And I've been doing that kind of thing ever since. I'm now involved in various projects in residential real estate development, in software, in media. But the company that we're here to talk about today, and the one that I'm super proud of, is a company called Lacàph. It's a Vietnamese coffee company, and it really came out of the sort of realization that although I'm living in Vietnam really because I love Vietnam, I don't live here only because of the economic opportunities here. Um, I really, I was doing things that I was proud of, but they had nothing really to do with Vietnam. They were bringing foreign brands to Vietnam, and they're great companies, but I wanted to do something that was really sharing what I love about Vietnam, or an aspect of what I love about Vietnam, with people around the world. And so I looked at various categories because I don't really come from a coffee background.
Mm.
I looked at tea. I looked at fish sauce. I looked at wine and spirits. I thought, maybe we could create a company that works with the ethnic groups of Vietnam. There are 54 other ethnic groups in Vietnam, and they all have these, unique spirits and things like that. So I thought maybe we can work with them and make really, nice versions, very modernized, with very clean processes, and for global audiences, so we can share their cultures with people around the world. But ultimately, Vietnam is the second largest coffee growing country in the world. And so I thought, and it has a unique, distinct coffee culture, which is wonderful. And so these two things made me really realize, coffee is where it is, where it's at. And there's a huge amount of coffee growing here. And so what I really want to do is bring more of the value capture of that industry here to in Vietnam, because at the moment Vietnam really exports a lot of the green beans, and relatively low value per ton average. And so what we were really trying to do is make a brand that's proudly Vietnamese. Um, Besides myself, basically everybody else in the company is Vietnamese, and we're really trying to create a product that can be enjoyed by people around the world. And so that's what we've been doing for the last 4 years. It's really creating a high quality Vietnamese coffee brand that ultimately we hope to bring to all parts of the world. We're actually working. I know that you're in Perth, so we're working on bringing it to Australia next year, and many more markets in the future.
Oh, perfect, mate. So much to work with then. Yeah, strong coffee scene here in Australia too. So
I
you got
know,
your work
yeah.
cut out for you.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll be able to bring in something pretty unique. I
Mm,
think that the coffee scene is very, very sophisticated in Australia. Um, our message is really a balance between the product, the commodity product, so the coffee, and the storytelling behind the product.
mm,
So I often say, our product that we sell is only about 50% coffee. The other 50% is really what's all around the coffee, the culture, the history, the coffee culture itself, where people sit on the streets and they spend time with their friends and colleagues and discuss the going ons of the day. And that's something really unique. It's kind of the opposite of Italian coffee culture in some sense, because where Italian coffee culture is generally speaking about speed, Vietnamese coffee culture is really about taking your time. And that's sort of something that I think that we can all use a little bit more of, taking our time, spending time with each other, socializing over coffee rather than only using it for its sort of periphery benefits.
yeah, no, I'm totally with you there. And yeah, so how did you develop this sort of how your storytelling and your brand? How have you sort of worked on that? Was that something you learned at Remy Quattro, or yeah, how have you worked on it? I guess.
Yeah, so I think it's. I mean, I'm a big fan of Steve Jobs, so I always think about what he would say. And so he said something like, that if he had not dropped out of college and taken some sort of course in calligraphy, the Macintosh would never had fonts,
Mm,
and probably PCs would be very different today. Now, maybe by today there would be fonts, but one thing leads to another. So certainly having because in wine and spirits, storytelling is so important, right? And so the history of Remy Martin as a cognac brand is again, huge part of why people want to buy Remy Martin. And so it's the same for what we're trying to do, but it started there. I had a really excellent experience with working with an artist here in Vietnam, and it was really there that I realized really the added, almost, financial value that storytelling can bring to a product, right? Because without that context, it's just another coffee product. And if you build that context for consumers, and if they appreciate it, not all consumers will appreciate it, but if so, a lot of consumers do, they want to know about where the products come from and who grew it and things like that. So if you're able to tell that story alongside your product, you're going to add some value, and people are willing to pay for that. They care about this sort of thing. Um, so it was through the working with this artist that I really came to that realization that because he was selling photographs, and a
mm,
photograph without a story is just a pretty picture. And you can go to a stock photography website, download a high res picture, a beautiful Sapa or Halong Bay or something like that, Hoi An, and you can print it. And you're probably going to be out for a couple $100s to get it nicely printed and everything like that, but it's not that expensive, right? So but he was able to bring context to his photography by telling a story about the people that are in the pictures, and that was really what people were looking for, and made people excited and willing to pay for photographs, right? And so it's kind of with that learning that I approach this project too, right? It's like, yes, we're selling coffee, but it's really coffee with a story, for people that care about where their products come from. And it's not just coffee or what they buy, but even where they, the sort of people that care about where they go to on holiday, right? You can go on a great holiday, spend time on the beach and things like that, and drink cocktails. But the people that come to Vietnam usually are after a little more. They're gonna want to know more about the culture, the food, history. They want to see the new Vietnam, and so we're really after that kind of consumer, right? We're really after people who are curious about the people around, about the world around them, and kind of they care a little bit more about where the products come from and who made it, and was it made with care and things like that. So yeah, storytelling is so important to our products, and it really comes from that whole evolution of working at Remy Martin and working with this artist and many little things in between that made me realize that this added value is so important to what Lacàph is today.
Yeah, mate, that's beautiful. Perfect. So much to work with. And yeah, because you recently underwent a packaging redesign. I sort of read through a feature about it. So could you talk about maybe what it was like before, what it was like after, what you're hoping to achieve with that, specifics? Yeah, I'm just keen to hear what you sort of your process for that was.
Yeah, we I think we have distinctive packaging, but I think for a while it was extremely simple. And I was quite concerned for a long time that if we were gonna really start pushing this into wider distribution, we're gonna have issues standing out. And as many know, in retail, if you get delisted, it's going to be very difficult to get relisted. So I wanted to make sure that we had something that was very distinctive. So we came up with this, and also, we're not a massive coffee brand yet, so we're not able to, meet these large MOQ, minimum order quantity standards that a lot of our suppliers are asking for. So, and that's a little bit less of an issue these days, to be honest. But still, it pushed us to think, a little bit beyond what coffee bags maybe always look like. So we have this sort of flap design that comes with a rivet at the top, and it's a bit unique. It stands out on the shelf. It doesn't travel too well, unfortunately, because when it's been shipped to Hong Kong, for instance, it doesn't always look so good. So we're kind of dealing with that now, but generally speaking, it is very unique, and it provides extra information on the back flap, so to speak. So, yeah, we won a runner-up award in the UK for that design, which is great. And we're always innovating, so we're already working, thinking about how can we make the next generation of our packaging. I think we're trying to make that the next edition, next generation of our packaging to be sort of not the final, but it'll be the one that we're trying to stick with, because changing your packaging is not always a good idea if you're doing larger distribution. But we're learning along the way, and we're learning also about export, because we do want to make a product that is enjoyed by people around the world. So that's sort of the next challenge, is making sure that your packaging is ready for export, that it's going to look as good in Perth in a premium grocery store as it does here in Vietnam at Anam Gourmet.
Because it's so true. Because first impressions do count, isn't it? Especially for you guys as well, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we want to make sure that people, recognize us, and especially the coffee category. I mean, if you go to the grocery store, take a picture of the different selections of coffee. I mean, I venture to say like 80% of the products look really similar, and brown, gold, copper, that sort of stuff. And we wanted to, our logo is purple, for example. So we wanted to really do something a little different, and it's sort of differentiated and recognizable. Um, and we're constantly evolving and trying to make it better. I'm never worried about people copying us, because I'm always focused on what's next. And so, yeah, but differentiation is super important, but also not getting delisted, right? So you need to make sure that you have the right uptake of your product when it hits the retail shelves, so that you don't have an issue in the future. Yeah.
Yeah. Just for me, I'm curious because I don't know. It's like, yeah, with retail getting delisted, what's that involve? What's that like? I just don't know. Like, could you explain that maybe just a little bit for me?
Yeah. So, I think you definitely need a first success to it's, I mean, I don't know how it works in the US or other developed markets, but it did definitely require a creative approach, so to speak. So because buyers for grocery stores, they have people asking them all the time, take my brand. And so how do you actually get their attention? Well, in this case, I actually knew the one of the co-owners of a large grocery store brand here, and that's sort of the benefit of being here so long, is that I kind of end up knowing more and more people. And so it was sort of like, you had to be honest, by leveraging that relationship and kind of name dropping, like, yeah, so and so told me to contact you, because you're apparently the one to speak to. And then it was like, oh, this guy knows this guy, so you're going to have to take it a little bit more seriously than you usually do. And even then, it wasn't particularly easy. So eventually, it was sort of like I kind of forced myself into, not force myself like physically, but like I kind of like pushed for a meeting. I invited myself for a meeting that otherwise wouldn't have existed. And once you're in, then things become significantly easier, because then you have that relationship. They can start tracking your sales. They kind of can see how professional you are as a supplier. And then you continue leveraging, right? You say, hey, it's doing super well at this grocery store, you should have it too. And and try to sort of have that knock on effect. And then sometimes go for like a premium brand in retail, but maybe not with a huge network, and then sort of work your way up, right? So and you keep it continuously learn along the way what works, what doesn't work, and what they're asking for. But yeah, it's a process, and I don't think that there's any a guidebook necessarily. And I'm even within Vietnam, I know that the market is really different from north to south, right? Like in the south, the requirements are going to be different than in the north, and I'm sure in the US and in other countries, every market will be different. So but definitely, I think don't be shy is very important. You're going to have to put yourself out there and be ready for a lot of no's, and be ready for constructive feedback. I think generally speaking, people want to help, but they have their lives too. They have their job. They're really busy, and so you're going to have to figure out how to get their attention. And I think one of the key learnings that I've had is that you shouldn't be too you shouldn't be necessarily too difficult, but definitely don't be shy. You're gonna have to put yourself out there. You're gonna have to push for it, and if you don't do that, other people will. So if you're the one that does it best, and obviously creating value for them, try to create a pull situation where they can show, for instance, oh, you're taking on direct trade products now, so that's something that they can then communicate with their consumers as a positive benefit for shopping at their grocery stores, that it's sort of supporting local brands and things like that. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that echoes so many of my same feelings with this podcast. Find a way in, drill down, but then give them some value, make it worth their time. I think it's a perfect way to operate in any way, I think. So
yeah, especially if they're large, like they have their things, they don't owe you anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's no free lunch. There's no free lunch. There's you need to show why you're there. You need to prove why you're there, and you need to add value, right? Like, for example, we're working with a distributor. They're big, they're powerful, they don't even need really a coffee brand, but what can we do for them? So for example, they have products that are very complementary, like for example, syrups and stuff. And so and they sell dough for pastries and things like that. So if they have a coffee brand, and if we can add value by creating new recipes, for instance, with their products and our products, right, then suddenly, wow, when we sell their coffee, we're going to also sell all these other things that we already have. And so as a small company, you can be very creative. You can move much faster than larger companies. And so that's what we're doing now, right? Like one new recipe a week. We can send them one new recipe a week, and they send it to their customers, and it uses their products in the recipes we create. And it happens to also use ours. So
perfect. Okay. Couple of things there.
sure.
Even just at the very end is you sort of mentioned you can move very, very quickly, very nimble. You can change up. How do you choose what to focus on though? Because I'm early stages of sort of doing my own sort of stuff, and it's like I really need to find out. I need to focus more because there's too many things I want to work on, too many good ideas. How do you choose what to focus on and where to stay in your lane, I guess?
I think you're asking the wrong person, because I'm really bad at that, and I'm better at it. I'm getting better at it as I mature as a leader. And I'm recognizing the importance of it to cut down and focus. Same time, I would say Vietnam is a bit interesting because there is so much that you can do, and you can actually try ideas with relatively low risk, right? Like you don't have to spend, if you want to launch a new concept, it's not going to cost you, tons and tons of money, because regulation is a little easier here still, and development costs are lower than I presume they'd be in Australia. But yeah, generally speaking, yeah, it's important to see what works, try things, and definitely it's an 80-20 rule, right? So you need to recognize the things that are not working, and I would say simplify that way, cut down. When I started the company, for example, even some things like how many products you create, right?
Mm.
So one of the things I recognize in especially the specialty coffee industry is that they have lots and lots of different options, right? And that's sort of what specialty coffee really focuses on is, really interesting blends or single origin products. And that's cool. But I think many consumers are intimidated by that sort of offering, right? Like just like wine in the 90s, right? Like, before New World became a thing. And it's really New World wines that really, Australian wines, Chilean wines, things like that really benefited from this, from simplifying that very complicated offering and trying to explain things in a better way. And that's what we're trying to do. We only create 3 coffee blends. We don't have tons of different products in that sense. We create 3 core coffee blends: a filter blend, espresso blend, and then what's called a fin blend, which is a Vietnamese style coffee blend. And what we try to innovate is how we get it to consumers. So we're trying to get it in drip bags and in different sizes, and cold brew versions and things like that. So yeah, so definitely, whether it's your products or the kind of projects you're looking at, is you should have a strategy, right? And you should be able to be sure that you can, that you have a plan for how you're going to do it. I can't necessarily say, oh, it's good to have very few things to do. I think it really depends on your company and your business, and what you can afford and what you're used to, and things. Like, I say afford because, can you hire lots of staff to help you execute? But in any case, yeah. So, we do a lot of things. We're trying to prioritize as a company, but it's certainly not. It's not like our forte. We really like doing projects, and we just launched, for instance, we launched with a well-known YouTuber today, a new product for the US called Best Ever Coffee. It's a kind of a tongue-in-cheek name because his show is called Best Ever Food Review Show. He's a big YouTuber,
Oh, yeah, I
and
know
so
him. Yeah.
yeah. So he's actually editing his work in Vietnam. He has a team
Ah.
here, and so we met. And so another thing, right? It's another project, but I see it as a wonderful opportunity to learn about how to sell to the U.S. market. So I want to do it. So it's not necessarily focused, but it helps our mission, right? Because our mission is to share Vietnamese coffee and culture with curious people everywhere. And so I said, this is aligned with our mission. We should do it, and we can learn along the way what American consumers want and how we can deliver it. Also, the logistics of getting everything to the U.S. So, yeah.
Ah, that's awesome. That's so cool to hear. Because I've watched a few of his episodes, and same thing. He comes across, curious, learning to understand about the culture and the food behind it and people's stories. And mate, that's awesome. So good.
Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned it a little bit before, how there's sort of no guidebook for you, and how you start operating. But how are you learning? Are you bouncing ideas? Is it a small scene there in Vietnam, either with coffee or entrepreneurship, and you're bouncing ideas off people? How are you going about learning, improving? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, definitely there's a lot of entrepreneur. I mean, Vietnam, I would say almost everybody's an entrepreneur in some sort, right? Everybody has a side hustle or some sort of business. Um, yeah, but there are brands that certainly inspired me a lot here. So besides my own experiences as learning about the power of storytelling, I I also know very wonderful people like for example Vincent and Sam from Maru Chocolate. It's a local chocolate brand here, and they're a huge inspiration because they showed what's possible creating a high quality, proudly Vietnamese uh, chocolate brand for global audiences. So and to some extent, really inspired by them. And I message Vincent now and then asking for advice. Hey, when you set up an ERP system, for example, what did you what's your experience and things like that. And I'm very blessed by the fact that a lot of my connections have done it before and gone through the mistakes, and hopefully can guide me more or less. I mean, we'll still make mistakes, but guide me in the right direction. But yeah, I think trial and error is huge, and experience is huge. At the beginning, when I first started really investing in developing businesses, I did not appreciate how important experience is. And, although young talent can be super creative, having experience how to run through a project, how to manage relationships, whether they're internal or external, is so important. So yeah, trial and error, learn every day, stay hungry. It's very important to keep on learning and educating, and make mistakes,
Yeah.
learn from them.
Perfect. Awesome. And I'm surprised we've gone this long without talking about it, but just general coffee culture in Vietnam. Got any stats for me, especially given you've been there for 16 years? Like what changes have you seen? What's the whole scene and market like for someone like maybe in the US or Australia who doesn't know what it's like there?
Yeah, when I left for Vietnam, there were no Vietnamese restaurants in Amsterdam, where I'm from. So and now when I go back, I think there are at least 20 Vietnamese restaurants. So Vietnam is enjoying a massive increase in interest in its food and culture in general, globally. And you see it in the US a lot as well. And there are a couple of Vietnamese American coffee brands that have sort of started becoming more and more popular there as well. And the coffee scene here has matured significantly. The quality of Vietnamese coffee has improved tremendously over the last 10 years. And consumers here are becoming more more discerning in that sense. They definitely want to know what's in their coffee more and more. They want to make sure that it's pure and clean and well roasted in a professional environment. And so that has been improved a lot because of the specialty coffee scene, but also because of the consumer cafe scene, right? So the regular like Starbucks just hit 100 stores here, so it's not probably what they were expecting. They were probably expecting higher growth, but some of the local brands like Phuc Long and Highlands Coffee have been doing super well, and growing into at least on paper, about $1 billion businesses here. So there's a lot of energy, but professionalization is what's happening right now. It's making sure that the standards are high. And I always say to my colleagues, there's no reason why we should have any compromise on our standards versus any other country. So because it's not like the rules are different here. We can have very high quality standards in terms of hygiene, coffee quality, packaging, all that sort of stuff. We can do it just as well as anybody. So we keep on going that way. But consumers are willing to pay more. They care more about quality, and it's there's definitely still a coffee scene on the street here, but it's not like it's definitely also a little bit more in the cafe now, a little bit more sort of modern in that sense.
Yeah, I remember being there this time last year, and honestly, it felt like there was a Highlands Cafe Amazon or a Phuc Long on every corner, and they're packed to the brim, like not quite, and they're everywhere. So
yeah, absolutely. And some cafes even run 24/7, and if you go at 11 p.m. at night, they'll still be busy, and so there's no right time for coffee in Vietnam.
Yeah, no wrong time either.
Yeah,
you're right.
There's no such thing as the wrong time.
Yeah, and I'm not super coffee conscious, like I don't know, but could you explain a bit about the breakdown between Robusta and Arabica beans? And where Vietnam fits into that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So Arabica was actually the first bean to arrive in Vietnam in 1857. So French missionaries brought it over because they wanted to have coffee, but Arabica didn't grow as well as they had hoped because we're a bit warmer and generally not as high altitude country as, let's say, some other countries in South America. And so at some point, they introduced Robusta, and Robusta, just like the name suggests, grows a lot stronger, is producing way more quantity, and also higher caffeine content. And so pretty quickly, the Arabica, was totally overtaken by Robusta. So today, 95% of Vietnamese coffee is Robusta. So Robusta has unfortunately, I would say 50% true, 50% unfortunate, gotten a bad reputation because it was grown primarily for quantity, right? So what happened was, the people bringing the coffee beans, they said to farmers, hey, if you grow this, we'll pay you per kilo. And of course, the equation works then that if you bring more kilos, you're going to make more money. And so quality was not a concern. And that happened many generations in a row. And so today, still a lot of farmers have the mindset that if they, that quantity is really the only variable that is important. And that is changing. We're, working with farmers, and so are many other brands, to really change that idea that really quality is a very important thing, and that in fact you can get paid more per kilo if you're going to produce a higher quality product. And then this whole debate between Arabica and Robusta. So Arabica is incorrectly marketed as a superior bean product. It's a more delicate bean for sure. But I think that if you were to do a blind tasting with, let's say, 100 regular coffee drinkers, I would say the majority would do in a blind tasting would say they prefer the Robusta flavor over the Arabica, because in fact, many of the sort of larger coffee brands and even cafes, they'll be serving coffee that has at least a large percentage of Robusta. And so that sort of dark, chocolatey, nutty notes, that's often coming from Robusta. And that's what people like in coffee. And so I think that, the idea that Arabica is somehow superior really came out of the specialty coffee industry. And it has been totally misused, kind of like the words artisan or craft or whatever, like they're used, they're abused, in fact. And so, coffee being 100% Arabica has absolutely no information about quality, right? In fact, in Holland, there's a grocery store. I was there, and for like 5-6 euros, you could buy half a kilo of 100% Arabica beans. It's really, really cheap, right? And so I tried it, and it's awful, right? So, and although I do agree that a lot of Robustas are not grown for quality, there are a lot of Robustas that are, and you can have really exceptional Robusta that just has a very different flavor profile and very different experience than 100% Arabica. And so it depends on what you like. And so, when you talk about Vietnamese coffee, especially traditional Vietnamese coffee, it's a heavy Robusta or 100% even Robusta coffee. It's very strong in terms of caffeine. And it has nutty, chocolatey flavors. It's really, really delicious. And I think more and more people, as especially climate change affects the Arabica cultivation, will be trying Robusta more and more in high quality Robustas. That's what a lot of farmers are working on right now here in Vietnam. They're working on transitioning from quantity to quality focus. And so you're going to see Vietnam becoming the dominant premium Robusta country in the world. And it's 95% Robusta. It's the number one Robusta growing country in the world, and it's going to become incredibly important. And we hope to be part of that story.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so interesting how like everything comes back to storytelling. Like Arabica just got it in early, so trying to reverse that change now.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, look, I have nothing against Arabica. It's but I think that the time has come for Robusta to be, people have another look at it. And I think that consumers will find that Robusta is extremely good. And it really depends on how it was grown, how it was processed, and how it was roasted. And just like with Arabica, you have you have terrible low quality Arabicas, and you have low quality Robustas. And if you find the right one, if you find a really good quality one, it's going to be a great experience.
Awesome. Okay. And you mentioned before the call that yesterday you visited a farm. Could you talk about like just your relationship with farms, like what you tried on cheap, like yeah, what was the point of the visit yesterday, and yeah, what's that whole relationship like, I guess?
So we're a direct trade company. We source for Lacàph all our beans directly from farmers with no middlemen. We do that because we want to be able to verify quality and also have a discussion with farmers about what to do to improve and have that feedback loop. We often call that cup to farm, because you hear always about farm to cup, but actually bringing that coffee back and bringing the feedback back to farmers, because they love to hear it. Actually, they work really hard to create the product, and very often they don't hear anything. It leaves the farm, and that's that. And so being able to come back to farms and talking about areas for improvement and what we can do to create a more interesting product as well, with different fermentation processes, for instance, is a really important part about what we can do as a direct trade brand. So we work directly with farmers, we source directly from them, and then roast it, package it, and distribute it. So when I go visit, I am a lot more technical than I was 4 years ago about coffee, but I'm still not as technical as some of the talented people that we have at the company. And so I'm not always talking about super technical things. When I go, it's a lot about relationships. It's a lot about sitting down with the family, having lunch, and discussing about their business and what they're working on and what they want for their kids and things like that. And yesterday's farm visit was really because we're discussing with a farmer about 5 hours drive from here, a project to start a research and development farm near his property. So the idea is that because Robusta is gonna, Robusta will have a huge increase in interest. It's not a if but when kind of thing. We need to start experimenting more and researching more, not only about the varietals, a lot of people are working on that, but about fermentation techniques and processing techniques, how to reduce reliance on fertilizers or pesticides, if any. There are natural pesticides that we're using instead of chemical pesticides, right? So there's some sort of like special mixtures that are not coming out of factories, or like not coming out of chemical factories necessarily, that we can use. And so providing this R&D farm so that we can really improve quality and do teaching directly to farmers, that's also core to what we're trying to do. So we're reaching out to NGOs to help fund a project where we can bring farmers to this farm, and they can learn with hands-on activities and two-week courses, essentially for free, how to improve their own farms. So the idea is that to develop that farm in a province called Dak Naum, which is about, like I said, 5 hours north. And that's the sort of stuff that we want to commit to, because we rely on having more and more of this really great product, and we need to have more farmers on board, and we need to convert more farmers from the quantity mindset to the quality mindset. And that's a scary transition, because that requires about a 30% cut in quantity to be able to do quality as a focus, right? And so a lot of farmers are like, that's very scary idea to cut quantity like that. And so that only makes sense if you can actually show them, with examples, with real life examples, that in fact the quality increase will more than cover that decrease in quantity, and it'll make their product more sustainable from a impact on the environment. They will be able to actually generate more revenues, not only from coffee. I mean, things like what's called intercropping, which means that you put different kind of crop varieties. So like, for example, nut trees or fruit trees and pepper and things like that, also between the coffee trees. that's another area that we're trying to push. Like actually, it's important because these different crops, they actually sort of compete for resources at different levels in the soil. So coffee will have more resources at their level, in that sense, and also reduces the farmers' reliance on the fluctuation of the coffee markets, right? So that if sometimes coffee's down, it's not gonna, they have other crops to fall back on and things like that. So all these sort of mixture of important things is what's going to result in a in a really in a better future for these people. And also it's just also a very good business because we're trying to we need to grow the supply of that top 5% that we're buying, right? The top 5% of the quality that we're buying, because otherwise if we don't work to help them grow that, we won't have enough product to buy. So
Yeah. Oh, cool. And I suppose, yeah, there's so much good stuff there. And it's always good to just know who you're working with. Like, yeah, I just like to know who I'm with.
absolutely. I mean, we're pretty transparent about it. We put the stories of the farmers and that we work with on the walls in our Lacàph space in Saigon here. Like, and on a lot of the coffee bags, when you flip the flap over, you can read about them themselves. Like, we're not secret. It's not secret who we buy from. And we've had people go and buy from those farmers directly and then say, oh, we're selling what Lacàph sells and things like that. I think we're doing a little bit more. It's about the blend, and it's about the know-how in terms of the roasting and things, but that's okay. Like I said, if people copy us, that's okay. We're always working on the next thing. So yeah.
Oh, perfect. And so for Lacàph, like, and back to storytelling, you mentioned before, it was funny, around artisan and like fluffy words like that are a bit overused. How do you still focus on storytelling, but without resorting to those sort of usual puff pieces? I don't know how do you approach it? Because it's something I'm interested in as well. So
Tell the truth,
yeah,
like, it's interesting because I think me as a foreigner, as like an immigrant essentially to Vietnam, right? I uh I think I have an ability to see things that maybe people who are Vietnamese don't see as quickly because they're used to it, right? So for instance, I think that the what's called a fin brewer, which is the traditional way of brewing coffee here in Vietnam, it's a brew tool essentially. Um, it's really interesting. No other country really uses fin brewers like Vietnam does, and so but for Vietnamese people, it's super boring, right? Because they grew up around them. Every house has maybe two or three or four fin brewers at home, and because they're not expensive, and so. But me as a foreigner, I'm like, actually, foreigners will find this really interesting to hear about how this fin brewer came about, how why is Vietnam the only one that really uses fin brewers like that, and so I'm able to see, oh, actually, I think that people around the world are going to be curious about this. So let's just tell the story about the fin brewer. And everyone's like, well, that's kind of common. It's like us telling the story about, something like milk or something. I don't know. But in fact, that's what can introduce people. And if you just tell the story about the fin brewer as we know it, people want to listen to that. And it's the same for things like egg coffee in Hanoi, which is a special way of making coffee. So the story there is simple, right? But it's fascinating. And it, just by telling the story, you can learn a lot about Vietnam in general. So the story goes that there's a barista working at the Metropole, which is a very famous hotel in Hanoi. It's a historic hotel now managed by Sofitel, and the barista there, they had fresh milk, right? And because they had refrigeration in the hotel, but outside of the hotel, refrigeration was relatively uncommon, and so milk was uncommon, right? And he was able to make cappuccinos for the guests of the hotel, but when he went back home, milk was not available, and so he couldn't bring that same experience to his community. And so what he figured out is by whipping the egg yolk, and adding a sugar, condensed milk, and adding some other ingredients, you can create kind of like a sweet foam. And so, and then you top your coffee off with that. And then it was kind of like a replacement cappuccino in a way. And so through, and that became incredibly popular. He opened up a cafe, and now egg coffee is everywhere in Hanoi. And we teach people at Lacàph about egg coffee and its history. And just by that story, you can learn so much about, the fact that, milk was not common, and economics, and sort of wealth disparity, and all that sort of stuff, and the creativity and the resiliency of the people. And so, those little stories are what are so revealing, and you don't have to embellish them. You just tell the story, and it's interesting for people.
Yeah, awesome. I'm glad you told that story, because I went to the, I forget the name, but the original store, and honestly, one of my favorite coffees I've ever had in my life. But half of the story itself, but
Yeah, exactly. And so, when people come to Lacàph space here in Saigon, which is in the south, we have we produce beautiful videos of things like this that tell the story, and people can come there and learn how to make egg coffee and watch the video and tell people, it was I believe the father of the current owner who was the actual original inventor, and lots of people still involved, and very, very proud of that, and they should be. And it's really, really a unique product. And it's I think it's our number one coffee experience that we have at Lacàph space here in Saigon, is the egg coffee experience, because it's fun, it's light, and it's delicious.
Yeah, very unique. Yeah, even like the original stuff, I remember at the original cafe, the wooden stalls, the wooden seats, you know what I mean? Like everyone's just sitting around chatting away. Like it's just cool little things. So yeah.
Yeah, that again, that reflects the social nature of Vietnamese coffee culture, right? So people really spending time with each other. And that's what I like, right? We have the Fin brewer, and it's not fast, right? Sometimes it takes you 4 or 5 minutes to brew your coffee with a Fin brewer, but that's actually one of the benefits of it, is that you spend some time with each other. You're not in a rush, and I think that when I look at some cafes in Europe, I think it could work, to be honest, because people are appreciating more and more those moments with each other, right? There's a little bit of a backlash against, I mean, not with everybody, obviously. Digital is super popular. I'm not saying that that's not the case, of course, but people are realizing, oh, real life is pretty good. Real life is not so bad. We don't need the metaverse necessarily. And so, why don't I invite my neighbor for some coffee and let it drip, and have 5 minutes before we can even drink our coffee, so we can just have a little chit chat.
Yeah, no, I love it. Purposely. Before I get to my closing round of questions, because I really appreciate your time today, but before I get my closing round, is there anything we haven't talked about that's consequential about the future of coffee in Vietnam or Lacàph, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting is that I have a friend who's the founder of Buster Street Brewing Company, which is a craft beer brand here in Vietnam, and he since sold his shares. But he asked me a really kind of revealing question: do you have any videos of your roastery? And I said, yeah, sure. It's on our Instagram and things like that. And I asked, but why do you ask? And he said, well, because people outside of Vietnam, they might not have a very positive perception about the quality of the facilities and things like that we have here in Vietnam, not only Lacàph, but just in general, right? The perception is not necessarily one of, super quality. And our roastery is, really, really high quality. We have, optical color sorters from Japan, and the Gießen roaster from Germany, and actually Holland. Sorry, it's my country, but it's just on the border with Germany. Um, and so we need to work on that perception issue, right? When people go and see that video, people are like, wow, that's a really beautiful roastery you have. It's like clean white walls, very professional equipment. People don't think that is the standard that we have here. So we need to work on that, and together, and really change the perception that Vietnamese coffee is not all low quality, super heavy, no fillers, no preservatives, no, like at least in Lacàph's case, additives. And that we have a, very international style. I mean, we have an FDA, we have a HACCP, certifications, which are sort of hygiene certifications and things like that. So we're able to make the same, premium high quality coffees as any roaster in the world. And so, but that shows that people need to see that, and we welcome them to Vietnam to see it, or visit our YouTube page and Instagram to see the videos, because Vietnam is a great place to source coffee from, and we are also able to really produce some of the best products as well.
Yeah, love it. So yeah, final round, rapid fire maybe. How many coffees are you having a day at the moment?
Not a lot, actually. I just have usually about 2 or 3.
Okay, so that's a good number. Yeah, because that's what I was going to ask. Like, any thoughts around like caffeine's benefits, downsides? Like, you might judge me. I'm a decaf dodo. Like, I've been on decaf unless I need it. So, yeah, thoughts?
Yeah, actually, when I started the business, certainly had a more what you hear about shakes and things like that. But now I don't have that as much anymore. But I definitely stopped drinking, around just after lunch. I usually try not to drink any coffee after 2 or something like that. So in terms of benefits, there's definitely a lot of debate, I would say, about whether coffee is good for you or not. I think it depends a lot on the quality and what's added to it or not added to it. So try to find things that are, if possible, direct trade, so that the roaster is also being able to take responsibility for the quality of the beans in a large sense. I think it's about the reputation of the roaster and such in general. But I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to claim that caffeine is necessarily good for you. When I go on the mountain runs, because I sometimes join these mountain marathons, I take these gels and they always have caffeine in them. So clearly somebody thinks also that caffeine can help performance. But I think that caffeine is not a negative thing. Actually, I don't drink alcohol anymore this year, and I started drinking 0.0. So before, so alcohol, like no alcohol beer. And also if you asked me a year ago, I think, oh, that's kind of a silly category, right? Like if you're going to drink beer, you should have beer with alcohol in it. And now I don't think so at all, because it's really actually great, being able to have a beer and not want another one necessarily immediately, because that's what happens with alcohol. And also, feeling 100% fresh the next day. It's so useful. So, the same for caffeine. I think that, one of the issues though with caffeine, decaffeinated coffee, is not is that the process is sometimes not always, I don't want to say it's necessarily proven bad for you, because obviously they're selling it. It's like it's regulated, but yeah, it's certainly not as natural as just coffee beans that have the caffeine, because at this point there's no naturally 100% free, 100% caffeine free coffee that I know of, at least coffee varietal that I know of. It's actually it's a defense mechanism, right? The caffeine that's in the beans is a defense mechanism against insects. So I don't know of that, but if they come up with some sort of GMO caffeine free coffee, that probably would be better than the methods that they use to decaffeinate coffee today. But I know that there are good companies out there that have really modern technology and much more like clean technology to decaffeinate coffee.
Yeah.
The issue in Vietnam, though, is that the decaf coffee coming out of Vietnam is not always really high quality. And so it's difficult because it requires huge investment in the equipment to decaffeinate coffee generally, at least at scale.
Okay. Just quickly, sorry, because I just don't know myself, and now I'm curious. What's the decaf process?
So there's actually, there's, again, I'm not really an expert. No, not at all. But there's one way that uses more water, from my understanding, and that's the most modern way. So there's a company called Swiss Water, and they have they're a green bean supplier. So essentially they buy green beans from all over the world, and then they decaffeinate it, and then they become a supplier of specifically decaffeinated coffee. From my understanding, this is a more less bad way of decaffeinating the coffee. And then there's a chemical way also, which is the sort of more common way and done a lot for like mass brands, decaffeinated mass brands. Um, now, and what's interesting about Vietnam again is that in fact there's a lot of what I call industrial grade coffee that's grown here, and that's often only grown for the caffeine content. So it's where the companies, they'll buy the coffee, they'll take out the caffeine, and the value is not actually the remaining bean as much as the caffeine that just was extracted, and they'll sell the caffeine through to pharmaceutical companies and to energy drinks. And so yeah, so there's a process to do it, and in fact a lot of businesses, they'll focus on actually the caffeine rather than the coffee. But yeah, I think it's an area that I hope, we've been testing it. We've been working with decaffeinated beans a bit, and the results are promising, but it's a little early to tell whether we want to launch a decaf product, that because we only use Vietnamese beans, that's sort of our brand promise. And so we want to also, and we only produce high quality products, so we want to make sure that when we do release it, we're really proud of it as well.
Yeah, very cool. Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yep.
Last two questions.
Sure.
You mentioned Steve Jobs. Any other
Yeah.
people or books that have been influential in shaping you, your worldview, how you operate?
Yeah. Actually, interesting you asked. So I just finished an online program called Stanford Graduate School of Business Lead certificate program, professional certificate program, or something like that. Yeah. And that was really interesting. But it's about a year and a half. It took me about a year and a half to do it. And the last course I took, and I'm so lucky to have taken it, is called Power by Professor Pfeffer from the Stanford Graduate School of Business. And he wrote he wrote a book called Power, and it's a book about sort of how to become powerful and manage it, and how what you're going to have to deal with, kind of. And I took the course because it made me uncomfortable, right? This idea of wanting power, because I think because of pop culture, in cartoons, for example, or in things like Iron Man, right? Or maybe Iron Man's not the right example, but in generally in pop culture, the people who want the power are usually the evil ones, right? Because they want to become powerful for the sake of being powerful. And the ones who don't want it but reluctantly accept it because otherwise nobody can save the world are the good guys, right? So somehow, like, this idea of accumulating power in my mind was a negative thing, but this course has helped me really convert that and rewire my brain into into understanding that power, if you want to have a positive impact, you need to become powerful, right, in a sense. And so that was really eye-opening, and it took me a little while, and I'm still working on it, to be honest. But he wrote a book called Power, so you can go on Amazon or anywhere really, and type in Power by Pfeffer, and yeah, it's a really great book. I highly recommend it for anybody, because it's definitely not an easy to process book, because there's a lot of things that are true but not very comfortable in that book. But it will really help you if you want to become a successful, strong leader, and if you have a positive mission in mind, right? If you want to make a positive impact on people's lives, on the environment, on your colleagues, on the company that you work in, or even obviously as an entrepreneur, I definitely recommend this book. And I don't think that there's a book that helped me more than that, because it really helped me rewire my brain and understand that, how to manage it, and also recognize things I'm not good at. Like, for instance, I'm really not good at conflict, right? I really avoid conflict. I avoid confrontation and things like that. And I always kind of knew this about myself, but I never had it so clearly, like, put in front of my, not really read it and realize it. And then once I realized it, it's become a lot easier for me to deal with that, and overcome 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 this fear of, almost fear, right, of conflict, right, and rather and approach these issues head on rather than avoiding it. And so that has helped a lot, right? Because if you want to accumulate power for good, you're going to have to still deal with a lot of conflict and things that don't work out, and people that whether their perspective is different or actually that they don't want you to succeed, whatever it is, you're gonna have to deal with it. And that's unfortunate, but that's the truth. And so this book really helped outline it. It's very practical. Although the content is not necessarily easy to digest, it's not difficult reading. So I recommend it highly. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm definitely going to that one because, yeah, something I can probably echo with. Growing up in Australia, tall poppy syndrome, it's a bit hard. People see you want to become powerful, successful. It's like, you're an idiot. Like, I don't know. It's hard to deal with.
Yeah, there's definitely, there are a couple things that are sort of like negative, like wanting, like I kind of feel like it's also in the coffee industry, to be honest, this sort of idea that you do it for the art of the coffee. You don't do it for profit. But the problem is that if you're trying to make a successful company, if you're trying to have a positive impact on your all the stakeholders, whether they're your customers, your employees, the farmers that you work with, all these sort of things, you need to become profitable, because that profit can be used for good, and so profit, success, power, all these sort of things are not dirty words in the right context, so and it's sort of like this starving artist syndrome that you sometimes see, whereas like people expect you to, like musicians get this all the time, where they're touring and they make almost no money from a tour. I mean, unless they're like U2 or something like that, or Taylor Swift now. They're ending their tour almost as broke as they started it, because there's no money in it, and people expect artists to do it for the love of the art and things like that. And it's really it's wrong. And so, so yeah, getting comfortable with that, and definitely having this sort of mindset that you need to be successful, because if you're not around in 10 years from now with your business, there's no way that you can have a positive impact on people's lives.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. Love that. Perfect way to wrap up. And yeah, just lastly, anything else we've missed? Where can people find you, or anything you'd like to add? Yeah, I'm incredibly appreciative of your time.
Yeah. So happy if people want to reach out to me. My email address is timen@lacaph.com, TIMEN @lacaph.com. And I'm also on Instagram and LinkedIn and things like that. I want to invite everybody who's listening to come visit Vietnam and come visit Lacàph. We have a lot of things to do, not just coffee, but coffee is a really interesting part about Vietnamese coffee, Vietnamese culture in general. And so please come and visit. It's very easy to get a visa if you need one. There's e-visas that take, I think, a day to process. And the country's super beautiful. There's so much to see. 100 million people that live here, and it's no better time than now. And so come visit. And otherwise, if you can't, try to find something Vietnamese from your grocery store. If you have something you can try, whether it's coffee or tea or some sort of dried fruit chips or something like that, have something Vietnamese, try it. It'll transport you almost like you're in Vietnam. So that's it.
I can't echo that enough. And yeah, just an anecdote from me about Vietnamese. I was chatting to my tradie mate the other day, and he's like pure ochre Australian on his like smoke break. And he's like, yeah, I just went and bought a bun me the other day, and raves about it. Like, so it's catching on. So yeah,
absolutely. I mean, just like this, Sunny from Best Ever Food Review Show. We're super proud that he decided, out of all the things he could have shared with his audiences, that he chose Vietnamese coffee, right? Because he loves it too. So I think that, there's definitely interest, and we're gonna, we hope to really share these products with people all over the world soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Timen. I really appreciate it.
Cheers. Thanks a lot, Colony.